Hello, welcome to discourse number 10 of the Philosophic Integration series from June 2020. The topic of this last discourse is about the concept of being semi-ascended. Before I carry on explaining that, it's very important to stress on this path that firstly, all of my work is a perspective on physical ascension, how to become physically ascended from the human form. It's a bunch of messages and communications from a higher worldly energy. Having said that, ultimately, I've come to an understanding in my practice that one can only reach a level of semi-ascension by one's own effort and merit in terms of physically ascending fully in the body and being excused the death. I believe that is a work of Source or God. You really don't have much say in that. I believe that if you work to become semi-ascended and to hold that level, the physical ascension matter takes care of itself, and only Source can know the hour of your ascension. It's very important to reflect on this. You can never actually know the truth about when you may ascend or what your ascension might actually look like. All of my work, no matter how detailed and expanded upon, it's a perspective. It's important to see it as a perspective, to use it in your practice. To find your own truths and ultimately to look at all of that in your awareness to try and come into a deeper understanding of what physical ascension actually looks like, what it means for you. And what you'll find, as I found, is as you evolve, the concept of what it is and the truth of its meaning will appear to refine itself and get more clear over time. You'll probably find that you'll go from moving away from this new age idea that we're all going to ascend on waves of love and light, and there's not so much effort involved because loads of people are pushing away behind the scenes to ascend the human race, so you don't need to do much anyway. All you gotta do is like tune into a few star beings and chill out. You'll probably move away from that notion and go through a series of stations in understanding to the point you'll realize that physical ascension, by its true definition, being excused death, is actually extremely difficult. It's like a top end achievement, and you'll realize the demands of the path, and ultimately you'll realize it's not possible to do a physical ascension or even have a crack at it without having established a favor, a relationship based on the favor of the gods and the higher powers overlooking your spiritual path. So it's important to bear all that in mind and to ultimately reflect on the fact that your physical ascension in the end is not in your hands. It's down to the gods, the higher astral beings, the star beings, whatever label you want to put to these higher beings. They will decide when you ascend, and it's in their hands. All you can do on earth is your work and to accumulate sufficient karma merit in order to be able to have a chance at transmuting the lower form and physically ascending. As a trap that people get into. They read a bit of my work they drink a bit of ayahuasca, and sometimes they take other substances as well, and they break through into a realm of understanding. They receive revelations, and suddenly they think they're going to physically ascend at a set time and date in a certain manner, and that's it. And when that happens, nothing can like talk them out of that awareness. They become stuck in a single revelation, and they've forgotten to look at it philosophically from all angles and to reflect deeper upon its meaning. And then when it doesn't happen for them, there's a big crash and a big crisis, because they've staked everything on a single throw of the dice, and the dice didn't go in their favor. And it's because they omitted the divine grace factor, and ultimately they didn't discern deeply enough what physical ascension actually means. You know, I've drunk a lot of ayahuasca in my life. I've drunk ayahuasca 1,000 times, and I've seen in my energy with my astral body what it's like to be ascended. I've had experiences many times outside of my body in those ascended realms. So I got a very detailed look and understanding into those realms, but never once was I able to actually take my physical body in there. So for me, after drinking 1,000 times the ayahuasca, no matter how much I saw the ascended realms, I realized that wasn't it. It was an integration of that energy in the earthly form. That was the only way for me it seemed meaningful to be able to continue to walk the path of spiritual and physical ascension. I've seen so many people get a sudden idea out of the blue on ayahuasca that they're going to ascend, and then they believe it's like that and they become fixed. When that doesn't work and it fails, as it will, then there's a lot of disillusionment and disappointment, and many people don't retake the path. And those that do take it up again have to like overcome a lot of self-created disillusionment. So you can avoid this phenomena by giving over to God or the higher powers the matter of your own physical ascension. You can't know better than Source or God when the hour of your ascension is. You can't know better. If you think you do, that's hubris. And also, if you think you can control or manipulate the higher powers of the source to achieve a physical ascension on the terms of your ego, again, this is hubris. And these two things, these two traps, are something to be very aware of. If you try and impose too much of your ego or hubristic intentions on the power of source, it will kick you back hard, and it will teach you a lesson. You know, if you're very humble in your spiritual practice, if you have been for many, many years, you won't kind of fall into those traps, and you won't have to go through the ego bruising experiences that come along with that. And instead of having like pushes, so to speak, try to push against source, seeing if you can ascend at a particular time and moment, because you're humble, you've let go of that. And it's that humility that gives the groundwork for focusing on becoming semi-ascended. I believe that's what one can do within the capacity of one's spiritual path. I don't believe one can totally make oneself physically ascend. That, in my understanding, in my many reflections, it's down to the higher powers, it's down to the gods, and it will be done at a time and manner of the choosing of those higher powers. They oversee my development, and my work is to present myself in the awareness of those higher forces, the gods, the divine grace, to present myself with humility and dedication to the spiritual path, to polish off my earthly vehicle in terms of keeping the body pure, keeping my sexual energy pure, keeping my intentions pure, and continuously refining and integrating the many different energies of the astral that they ultimately are the facilitator for. And by doing that, I can attain a state of what I would call being semi-ascended. This means you have ascended to a very significant degree because you've ascended out of the conventional karma human wheel. You don't exist in a lot of conventional realities. A lot of your ordinary human life has been left behind, and for many left behind, you don't even exist for them. You're not real in their awareness because you've gone so far on the spiritual path. You will leave their awareness, and to all extents and purposes, you've already physically ascended from that perspective. You'll still be here in a human body, so you know that you haven't physically ascended, but you will have ascended out of the karma of the human race. And when you look back on your spiritual journey, it'll be like looking down a very tall mountain at the way you've come. So you'll see you've come up a long way, so it's an ascension, but it's an ascension in awareness, in energy, in concentrated astral power, and in merit. So that brings you adrift from the ordinary humanity, and it puts you in this karma free grace state in a human body. And this is kind of like a midway point. That's why I refer to it as being semi ascended, because you're going to see from where you've come, and you're going to start getting more and more intense and deep looks or visions or insights into what being more fully ascended may be. And that's your work as a student on this path, is to attain this astral grade of being semi-ascended. Another way of looking at that is that you've come out of the wheel of karma and rebirth. So the options that will be available to you will be being a non-returner, which involves ascension through death or ascension without death. It doesn't really matter which one you take, but if you're semi-ascended in karmic merit and awareness in this lifetime, in the here and now, and you can hold the state, then those are the destinies that lie ahead of you: ascension after death or ascension instead of death. And both of those lead to a state of not having to return to the 3D karmic wheel of reincarnation, rebirth, and death. So it's very important to contemplate and reflect and understand this concept of being semi-ascended. It means being adrift of the karmic human wheel and having attained a degree of astral karma merit. The grades of awareness are not always so clear cut and obvious to see, There's keys to immortality which define the different levels of the astral, but in terms of making the astral grades, there's no very fixed and clear demarcation lines. But what you will find on your spiritual path, you'll move slowly and then you'll get a push. You'll move slowly and you'll get a push again, and you can read into that every time you get a push, followed by a boost of energy. You're being notched up one astral grade, and holding the astral grade or even attaining that astral grade, it's about karma white stones, the white stones of karma merit. It's very important once you get to this stage of the discourses to reflect on impossible ablutions, what happened with my twin flame in terms of moving of the karma stones and the teachings of black and white karma stones, because ultimately when it comes to the higher astral grades and your spiritual destiny as an ascending being, all that ultimately matters is your allotment of karma white stones. It's all down to how many black stones you have and how many white stones you've had. And once you become semi-ascended, the chances are your pile of karma white stones will be very significant, and it will far outweigh any black stones you might have left. It's your obligation to yourself to remain in a state of awareness and mindfulness and self-honesty, and to always look within and see if you are karma clear. Sometimes you think you're karma clear, but there may still be some residual lessons. So again, it's important not to drink ayahuasca and then suddenly get into space and think, I've got all the white stones now, I can stop, I'm going to fully ascend. So you have to be aware of complacency. It's possible to fall down from the astral grades, but the more humble you are, the more likely you are to receive grace, and the less likely you are to make a mistake. There's a very advanced concept called divine infallibility, meaning that God is incapable of error, incapable of making a mistake, and by way of what that means, that also implies that God is incapable of making karma. So it figures that the more aligned you are with God or source consciousness, and the more you are attuned and in harmony with that, the less likely you are to make a big mistake of karma. You're far less likely to make a fuck up. You have to be careful and on your guard always never to make a fuck up, but I believe the more humble you are, the far less likely it is that you will trip up, and you can retain a state of karma immunity. What you don't want to do is burst through into the regions of a lot of divine grace and being karma free and being into a very fortunate place of awareness and merit, and then making a fuck up which will make you have to do a lot of that work again. So once you get to this discourse, it's very important to use the story of impossible ablutions and what happened to my twin to understand, because there's some very serious messages and warnings in this writing. And even if you take one on board and avoid making a karmic fuck up to that magnitude, you'll be spared a lot of suffering. You won't have to go through many, many lifetimes of karmic learning again. This is the reason why you want to focus on being semi-ascended in your energy awareness and leaving the physical ascension in the matter of the gods. You know, if you've come so far on your path, so far in progress, you do not want to go into hubris. You don't want to suddenly get overconfident and kind of similar to the Icarus myth, I think, is flying too close to the sun, being burned, and then having a big crash out. So know always the importance of living in humility. In my understanding, more often than not, if you don't have the humility, you won't even get to the semi-ascended state. But in some instances, it is possible to get there without sufficient humility, and if you then don't develop it, you'll then set for a fall. So humility is always about accepting Source or God as the higher power, and in that respect for the higher power of the gods, you keep your ego in check and you retain any grace you've achieved. You retain the white stones you've manifested and earned on your spiritual path, and the longer you can keep them, the longer you can stay in a space of high awareness, and that's very fortunate on the spiritual path. You want to use these white stones of astral energy, your positive karmic energy that comes from mastering your energy. They are for you, they're not to be distributed everywhere willy-nilly. They're for you to use for your own spiritual path and to complete your spiritual work. You will need a lot of karma white stones if you want to ascend. These karma white stones are your astral energy batteries, so to speak. So you have to have sufficient amounts of them, and you have to integrate the teachings of sanctums and sanctuaries, mastery over your sexual energy, mastery over your emotions, and mastery of how you interact in the earthly world, and a mastery over your own life in general, making sure that you're in command of your energy, and a mastery of humility to the higher power, making sure that your relationship with the higher power is right. If there's an imbalance in your life, always seek first to make good with God or Source your relationship, and then from there on you can work to resolve any imbalances in the outer. Once you attain what I call a semi-ascended state, and you can use the sharings in my last book to get a glimpse of what that looks like. You want to be able to remain in that state of power and grace and be very mindful with your energy. You've attained a degree of awareness and consciousness that very few other mortal human beings have ever seen. It's already a very fortunate place to be. You have to recognize that fortune and always be in gratitude to the higher power for having overseen your development and nurtured your path to the point you can come so far out of the reincarnational cycle at this time of global uncertainty and be in a very good space. The path of learning all the lessons about sanctums and sanctuaries and developing the right conditions and mastery over your energy, it's all about keeping hold of that merit that you've attained. You know, Buddhism will say about accumulating as many white stones as you can, and then automatically allowing them to be transferred to others from a state of compassion for humanity. You have to reflect on this possibility and the pitfalls of that path. In my understanding, giving away all your white stones is not compassion for humanity. Your white stones are your white stones, and that's it. People that integrated what happened with my twin and impossible ablutions will realize how much sacrifice that other people had to go through in the astral war in order so that I could get my white stones of karma back that had been taken from me in ayahuasca ceremony with dubious intentions. If you reflect upon what happened more there in that story, you'll realize how sacrosanct and important it is to keep those white stones and not to lose them. It's the white stones of karma that keep you astrally adrift. And it's also when you learn how not to take black stones of karma from others, you also learn to maintain that astral lift. Once you consecrate brahmacharya and get much stronger in that and get integrated in the fasting, that astral lift from the general collective of karma kind of like widens, and then you get drawn closer and closer to God, so to speak, and it becomes a self-perpetuating positive re-enhancing cycle where you'll feel yourself drawn higher and higher in terms of entering a deeper relationship with Source, with God, with the Overself. And it's important to stay humble because the ego will never understand what's going on past a certain point. You can understand with a refined intellect what's happening to you. You can understand with intelligence the many spiritual processes at work, but you can't understand from the ego mind a fuller and a more complete ego transformation in the presence of Source. You have to stay humble, and you have to have sufficient white stones in your energy to avoid the ego kicking you back and sabotaging your spiritual progress. It's absolutely important at all times to retain humility. If there's one thing you should do on the spiritual path, if you say to me, what's one thing to do, I would say be humble in the presence of the higher power. And most of the other things that I talk about, fasting, brahmacharya and everything else, they're like supports to the spiritual path. But the humility to God, to Source, is the main attitude to cultivate, embody and retain at all times, because the gods prefer humility. They don't like hubris. They don't like people and their egos pushing and poking, believing they can ascend here and ascend there. They prefer humility, and it's the humility that will give you the greater degree of favors from the gods, and those greater dispensations of favors, dispensations of divine grace, is what's going to sustain you on the spiritual path and keep you in a high vibration of karma immunity. So to close this up, the work is for you to use all the works that I've created over the years, all the discourses, reflect upon them and use them as perspectives. By the time you got to this point, you've gone through almost 120 talks of mine spread out over years, and you've probably read a lot of my work and integrated a lot about what's happened to me. Use all of that as a perspective. See if you can get some insights and understandings about how to refine in yourself the relationship with your higher power, how to be more humble, and use the teachings and materials to unpack your own karmas, see where to cleanse, where to purify, and also, more importantly, derive positive encouragement and faith on the fact that no matter what I went through on my spiritual path, no matter how bad it looked at certain points, in the end I came out trumps and in a very good space because I always remained dedicated and in a state of perseverance to keep going and allowing the healing process of purifying all my karma to come to its state of culmination. It's for each person to experience for themselves what it means to be semi-ascended, karma-free, or to be living in the energy of grace. I can give you some indications on how I got there, what I had to go through, the stages and the obstacles and the challenges presented. I can give some general indications as to what it looks like, but for you to experience it in yourself, as you'll know from impossible ablutions, you will have to do the work in yourself and see for yourself what the state of semi-ascended grace actually is. You can understand from my work in theory what that looks like if you're open in your heart and you listen to some of my discourses. You might have a heart emotional based resonance on what that looks like, but still you want to attain it for yourself. And when you attain it for yourself, you'll get the space and clarity in your life. And in that space, in that clarity, in the many years that you probably will have decided to set aside for yourself, you can explore and reflect upon what's happened in your own life in more detail. And you can also start to get a deeper understanding of what happened in my life. And if all goes well, fortunately, you'll be able to make the right sense of it, you'll be able to make the right decisions and come into a state of mastery sufficiently enough in this lifetime that you're done with the karmic wheel, and you'll make a grade sufficiently high enough that you won't have to come back here again, and you can reincarnate on a higher dimensional world of star beings, which is the driving force behind many students that come to explore this particular work and my life experience. So it's important to push and be determined on the spiritual path. Know when to push, know when to be determined, but also know when to step back and allow yourself to receive grace. And most importantly, love yourself, allow yourself to be loved by the star beings, and never give up on the path, because in the end, the payback, the payoff for the perseverance far exceeds the discomfort and the displeasure one might have to go through during the karmic purification process. It may take years and years, and it might seem that there's no end to it, but one day you will come to an end and you'll suddenly break free and then pop. And when you're in that semi-ascended space, you're going to be very glad and grateful to yourself that you continue to persevere with the work no matter what, because when you look back into the karmic wheel, if you get glimpses of the karmic wheel of humanity as a whole, you'll realize it's a very intense and it's a very deep place. And if you can get out of that and remain out of that, it's a very fortunate attainment to have achieved. It's important to recognize it for what it is and use the later teachings and the experiences of what happened to me to make sure that you retain that state of attainment, and also making sure that you use your energy correctly in this lifetime, master the manifestation of your sanctum, and master the unification of your energy field in the two aspects of wisdom and love. When those two are in balance, it's a very powerful tool. I can testify from personal experience, because I had the mirror of my twin to heal the imbalance between love and wisdom when they become harmonized. This was a supreme ramming ascending force, so to speak, and since the culmination of that deeper union of those two aspects of myself, I found myself catapulted up, up, up in awareness, and the relationship with me and God or Source is now very strong and pure indeed. So do use the many sharings and the experiences, use my works to try and understand what happened to me on a deeper level, some of the experiences I've had, use my life story and use the many sharings, and see if any of it makes sense for you and it's useful. I sense if you're pure and advanced enough on the path, you can use it. And when you can use it, do use it and make the most use possible of it. And try not to become disillusioned or disencouraged from the spiritual path, because ultimately you will attain the higher truths in awareness.